As people of the internet, we are no strangers to being routinely taken aback by shocking or disturbing content. This is no different. As a horror story veteran, all I have to say is, it gets bad. Content warning for creepy sexual behavior and incestual undertones. With all of that aside, brace yourselves. This is gonna get bad. Roll post. Yeah, it was bad. So this happened yesterday, and the situation is still kind of unfolding, so there may be edits with updates about what's going on. First, I must introduce the table. I go to XX College, and my whole group was gathered from people that either go to the same school or work and live nearby. Some of them I was friends with before the campaign. Others I've never met but had some connection to someone else in the group. A friend of a friend sort of deal. And then there is one guy who, to this day, I don't know how he even heard we were playing D&D and joined, because nobody at my table knew him. To give these people some fake names, we have GM, the GM, my roommate and best friend. Gyro, a chill guy playing a human warlock. Mouse, a super short player playing a Goliath monk. Rango, a taller player playing an artificer of an unknown race. Also one of my best friends. And Ditz, the most comfy human being of all time, playing a tiefling bard. Edgy, that guy playing a half-elf rogue, and me, playing a human paladin. We decided to meet bi-weekly at Edgy's house, since he had all the space we needed to play, and an actual table to sit at. Despite the kind of person we'd later realize he had become, he was a decent host, and his only rules were to keep the area clean, which he himself regularly didn't do, and to not get too loud as to not disturb his mom, who lived with him. Or he lived with her, I don't actually know, as he's changed his story so many times. Anyways, the campaign was going great. It was set in a jungle where a bunch of wizards exploded and made everything all magical and sentient, to the point where a kingdom of killer banana bunches had set up rule in a nearby town. This will come into play later. GM was great too, with a pretty amazing ability to come up with some of the best ideas I've ever heard on the fly. Seriously, he showed me his planning document once and it was like a dozen bullet points that didn't even talk about the story. Everyone was having a lot of fun. We had all played before, so we were pretty comfortable with roleplay. Hearing Mouse put on a deep voice for her player was fantastic, and Gyro's goofy antics were great. But the characters I want to talk about are Rango and Ditz. You see, Rango formerly belonged to a group of bandits that worked in absolute secrecy, even between its members. Rango followed that tradition after they left, meaning they kept anything about their true identity hidden, going as far as them wearing a hat, trench coat, and chameleon-shaped mask at all times. It became a fun mystery figuring out just who this laid-back medieval cowboy engineer really was. Notably, Rango's gender was also a secret and went by they-them pronouns, and took care not to enter any gendered fixtures, preferring to disappear into the woods to take a leak. I say this is notable because Edgy was constantly trying to find out what was in their pants. I mean, sneaking up and trying to remove Rango's mask in their sleep. Luckily, the player thought to put an alarm spell up. Trying to follow them to the bathroom, trying to get them to have sex with someone else. It didn't work. Rango always said that time spent having sex was time not spent holding up a bank. And outright going out of character tirades on why Rango should have a gender reveal specifically. This got a little weird, but we thought it wasn't too big of a deal, and Rango's player didn't seem to care, so nobody really stopped him. Mistake, I know, hindsight is 20/20 and all that. Pause post. Here we are beginning to see the early signs of a horror story. We're not quite there yet, but perceptive listeners will notice the disagreeableness and lack of consideration for other people. Obviously, nobody at the table is making a deal of it right now, and I don't blame them. Even the best people at the table can have a lapse in self-awareness and make mistakes. Two things, though, that separate the good people with flaws from the worst of the worst is how frequently they mess up and how much they even care to change in the first place. Given how fussy Edgy is getting over simply not knowing one of the character's secrets, and how many times he tried to find out, my guess is he is going to be a real pain. But for now, the calm before the storm is nearly over. Roll post. Ditz, on the other hand, was literally just Rango's IRL player as a character. You see, Rango's and Ditz's players are super close friends in real life. Rango's player is also pretty hypersexual, and she openly owns the fact that she's pretty easy as a person. Ditz's player, on the other hand, is completely asexual and is a quiet and shy person in real life, which makes it even more hilarious that she roleplays as the horniest bard you've ever seen. And she once avoided an entire adventure just by sleeping with a string of people all the way up to the queen, who was technically a suit of armor. Ditz's player also enjoyed making a voice and using mannerisms that sound just like Rango's player, who herself is using a talk like Ditz's player while in character. It's like they switched personalities while playing D&D, and it's a really fun dynamic that everyone has a great time with. I just realized I've never described edgy. Well, think of the most stereotypical rogue you could probably imagine, but instead of being ironic and funny like Ditz, he's played completely straight and the player thinks he has the epitome of cool. That's it. That's all he is. Generic to the core, but oh well, I mean, it worked. Anyway, Edgy was constantly making advances on Ditz in-game, which is a bit strange considering how Ditz was clearly based off of a real person sitting at the table. But it wasn't anything too weird, and Rango's players said she was fine with it when asked. However, Edgy had to wait a while to get what he wanted. Despite her real-life personality and preferences, in roleplay, Ditz was a master flirt and could charm just about anyone. This meant that by 2 weeks ago, the session before yesterday's, she had amassed a harem that spanned across the continent. And never has a night passed by that she wasn't planning on sleeping with someone else. Fortunately for Edgy, and unfortunately for everyone else, as this was the beginning of the madness, we had a night where it would just be our party camping out in the woods, giving Ditz and Edgy a perfect opportunity to do the deed, which they did in the standard Fade to Black style as always. Like I said, this is where the madness begins. You see, Edgy's player liked to draw, and was actually somewhat good at it. He had this anime sort of style, but everyone at the table enjoyed the medium, so we often used his art in the campaign. One practice he liked was that, at the end of each session, he would draw out an event that happened so that we could add it to our notes. I actually really liked this idea, and it was a fun use of his skills. But this time, he wanted to draw something a little bit different. Apparently, his standout event of the session was having sex with Ditz, and that's what he wanted to capture in his art. And of course, every good artist needs a reference, and Ditz was clearly based off of a real person, even in looks. So it wouldn't be creepy at all to ask Rango's player for, say, pictures of herself doing various lewd acts, would it? Yeah, needless to say, Edgy's player was not just going to be using those pictures as drawing material, and Rango's player was not having it with his insistence on lying about his intentions. Okay, wait. Hold it. This is the worst way anyone has ever come on to anyone in the long history of CritCrab horror stories. Just imagine for a second, right? You're playing a game and someone else wants to draw themselves boning you. Imagine that they don't even stop there. Imagine that they, through the combined powers of no self-awareness, artistic talent, and horny, are so into the idea that they have the audacity to ask you for sus pics. I don't know, if this story doesn't do a 180 and get better really quickly, I'm going to commit Crab Rangoon. But I guess there's only one way to find out, isn't there? I take no pleasure in saying this, but roll post. Rango's player immediately told the GM about this, and he warned the rest of us to be careful with Edgy's player, and that he would confront him about it during our next session. And so, yesterday's session began. Despite the situation, everyone was in good spirits, and Rango's player made sure to arrive with GM so Edgy's player wouldn't try to talk to her first. GM then quickly pulled Edgy's player to another room, and there was some hushed talking while the rest of us got set up to play. Thinking that he would just accept his actions were wrong, apologize, and move on, he did not. Instead, he speed walks out of the room, goes halfway up the stairs, and yells, "Mom!" And this is where the real story begins. Edgy's player's mom, I'm calling her Jocasta from now on, is a shortish woman that looks to be in her early 50s, and we've seen her around the house before, but she's never really introduced herself or interacted with us. There have been attempts on our end, but she mainly avoids our table like the plague, so it comes as a strange event that, at the behest of her grown son, she comes down and begins to worry over him, pulling him into a tight hug. Edgy's player begins to almost tearfully describe the situation. Of course, he made it seem like he did absolutely nothing wrong and that Rango's player was just a mean girl rejecting him, and GM was just a big bully. As Jocasta continues to wrap her arms around his shoulders, comforting her poor baby boy, she starts to scold us as we explain what really happened, obviously not believing a word we're saying. The entire time, Edgy's player is interjecting with lies, getting more and more frantic as he realizes his story isn't making sense, and getting more and more comforting shoulder rubs from Mama Jocasta. Finally, Edgy's player breaks down and starts screaming at Rango's player, who looks just about ready to fight him, and Jocasta turns all of her attention to him. She shushes him, holds him close to calm him down, and finally, she kisses him. I'm not talking about a sweet little mama kiss on the forehead. I'm talking about a kiss between lovers, with passion. I'm pretty sure there was tongue involved. Nope, that's it. I think I'm gonna vomit. This is one of the most disgusting things I have ever had to read in my long CritCrab career. Just put yourself there again for me, will you? Mentally put yourself at the table. After the GM has a private conversation on your behalf with the weirdo about how creepy it is to ask for your lewds, he speed walks out of the room, yells at you, and then starts making out with his mom. I would physically throw up on their table if I had to witness that. But this isn't over. We still have some story left, unfortunately, so let's get right into it. Roll post. At that moment, everyone kind of freezes and stares, until GM shouts, "Hey yo!" and starts running. I mean absolutely booking it towards our stuff and the door. A moment later, everyone follows suit and we all frantically gather up our stuff before literally sprinting out the door and down the street. We never stopped, never talked about what was going on, we didn't even look back. We were just a couple of people sprinting off into the evening to escape the horrors we just witnessed. We didn't stop until we reached me and GM's apartment. We all just kind of rushed in and frantically tried to make sense of what happened. It was impossible. And soon enough, Mouse, Gyro, Rango, and Ditz went home, leaving me to write up this report on the strange events of what is now yesterday's evening. The situation is still unfolding. We have had no word from Edgy's player, even though we've been texting him all night. Also, Mouse forgot her laptop at his house in the sheer panic of the event, so we have to get that back somehow. I'll try to keep y'all updated with edits as more happens, but for now, I must rest my mind to avoid any permanent psychic damage I may have sustained after seeing whatever that was. There is no moral to this story except the common sense of please do not randomly ask women for nudes and don't snog your mother. Also, if you have any ideas as to how to get that laptop back, please do tell. I'd rather it be the Sandlot style with as little interaction as possible, as there is no way we're stepping back into the lair of that beast. Edit. It was decided that if Edgy doesn't respond by midday today, about a half hour from now, the guys of our group, me, GM, and Gyro, would just go and get it, making sure to record everything if there's a problem. Edit 2. Yeah, this is gonna need a part 2. Things have gotten a little bit more criminal. Busy right now, but I'll update as soon as I can. End post, but in case you thought this nightmare was over, you're in for a sour surprise. Unfortunately, introducing part 2. Roll post. Content warning, same as last time with creeps and incest. Well, today has certainly been a day. After writing the last installment in this saga, I took a quick nap and woke up to make a plan for the day in dealing with Edgy. Me, GM, and Gyro were to visit his house, politely ask for the laptop, and initiate no other conversation. Drop it off at Mouse's place, and leave this whole thing as far behind us as possible. Never to be brought up again. It didn't end up working out like this, but the whole thing basically ended without the police getting involved, so sorry if you were hoping for that as a plot point. First hurdle, Gyro had to leave to go do some stuff. This led Rango to insist on coming with Laptop Retrieval Squad as someone to record everything to make sure that if cops were called for any reason, we have video of what was going down. Even though he had a possession that wasn't his, the law could easily turn against us since we were going onto his property. We didn't and don't know how the situation would play out legally at all, and it was just a safe bet to make sure everything was documented. 2. Getaway driver. No joke, Edgy is a known legal gun owner. He's bragged about it a lot, and he's even shown one to Gyro at some point. Even though he didn't seem like a straight-up murder guy, at this point we had no clue who he was, and we were pretty careful when handling him. This plan was accepted, and everyone hopped into the car and went to Edgy's house. He still had not picked up his phone, and we were unsure of whether he even knew about the laptop, but we planned to just ring the doorbell, ask him to bring it and its charger out, and wait on the porch to make a nice clean trade-off where we could all walk away. This only worked until step 2, when upon us ringing the door, Edgy immediately told us to, editing out the expletives and slurs that didn't match the race of anyone involved, "Get out of my house," ignoring the fact that we weren't in his house. After a couple moments of just pleading with him and even warning him out of the potential legal consequences of his actions, note that this was all done through the door, he never opened it, we decided to just go back to the car and regroup. We updated Mouse on the situation, and the poor girl sounded like she was going to be sick. She really did not want to get the police involved. She's had traumatic events involving the police in her past, and was almost ready to just give up. After talking a bit, we came up with the idea to see if we could find a friend of Edgy's and ask them to try and convince him to give us the laptop. And so we searched. We sent out texts to various school group chats, basically asking if anyone knew Edgy. After a surprisingly short amount of time, GM was contacted by a guy, henceforth known as Guy. Guy was actually pretty chill about the whole thing and offered to go down to Edgy's house and ask as a sort of mediator to pass off the laptop to us after he was done doing his stuff for the day. And that's exactly what happened. Guy went in, talked to Edgy for like half an hour, and came out with the laptop for one very relieved Mouse, who was in the car with us for our second trip back. All in all, probably one of the best outcomes for this whole situation. It didn't go exactly as planned, but everything was handled peacefully. Our goals were accomplished, and everyone went home. But nothing's ever that perfect, is it? You see, in our search for Edgy's friends, we stumbled upon and were given a cursed piece of knowledge. A veritable cognito hazard that would ruin the rest of our day. It was Edgy's Twitter account. And it was through scrolling his account that I learned 3 things, each worse than the last. 1. He has a massive fetish for Asian women. He has one of those accounts that mostly likes porn, and it's almost all Asian, specifically Japanese. And guess the nationality of Rango. Did you guess Russian? Because you would be wrong, she's Japanese. She's only half actually, but you wouldn't realize that unless she told you. The whole thing about him trying to solicit nudes was bad, but the fact that Rango specifically might have been targeted because of her race almost makes me furious, to be honest. And I kind of want to punch the guy now. I won't, but I want to. 2, he's a catfish. On his timeline, he acted as himself, but in almost all of his replies, he acted as a woman who made sure to include a nude picture of herself whenever possible. We don't know who these women are. They may just be pictures he found online, or they could be pictures he's successfully solicited from other people and is using them without their consent. Either scenario is reprehensible, but if it is the latter, legal authorities will be contacted no matter what. The fact that none of these pictures are coming up on a reverse Google search is frightening though, and this may just go from a silly RPG horror story to a criminal case really soon. 3. The thing with his mom is real, according to him. He pretty constantly talks about his relationship with who he claims to be his biological mom in his main tweets when he's not catfishing, praising the benefits of incest, and describing the sort of shit he gets up to. It's really gross. The one saving grace is that there is no actual evidence of this, and this may just be another thing he's making up on the internet. Or it may be the case, as someone's pointed out, that they're actually unrelated and the quote-unquote mom is just an older woman he's seeing and role-playing his mommy kink with. In that case, it's not my place to be involved, but if they are actually mother and son, then that kiss between them was not normal and help needs to be had with all parties involved. I don't know how that whole situation works out, but damn if this isn't messed up. And that brings us to now. Obviously, Rango screenshotted everything she could possibly find, and we all reported him as an impersonator. But now, we really don't know what to do now, besides wait and keep trying to get answers from Edgy, who has started to return our texts, albeit very evasively. All in all, this has been a weird experience, and I'm kind of worn out. I'm excited to keep playing D&D, but golly if this isn't a new, heavy load on all of our plates. And that's kind of been the last thing on our group's minds. I don't think there will be a part 3 to this story, mostly because I think this whole thing is getting way out of hand. But I will try and keep some edits of any really major updates that happen. All in all, this whole experience has scarred me for life, and this truly has been an RPG horror story. Thank you for reading my walls of text with way too many commas and confusing grammar, and good night. End post. Now, before anybody leaves this video with any shred of hope in their hearts that this is not his real mom, I present to you a comment OP left on the post. I'm pretty sure it's his real mom, same last name and everything. I kinda wish she was just his way older girlfriend though, because that would make this a whole lot messed up. That said, unless they are extremely committed to this bit, this is very likely an incest case. Even if she is somehow not his mom, this is still very sick behavior. I still think that Edgy is a bad dude, but it's hard for me to not feel bad for him. Behaving like this does not come from a good place, and the dude probably had a really bad upbringing. Anyways, if there are any developments to this story, I'll make another video or community post about it, but in the meantime, I have 2 amazing videos right here. Till next time.